Marcus Wellington adjusted his expensive watch as his black Mercedes pulled up to the prestigious Riverside Elementary School. The 42-year-old tech billionaire had built his empire from nothing, creating one of the world's largest software companies. But despite all his success, there was one thing that troubled him deeply: his 8-year-old daughter Emma's struggle with mathematics. Emma had been falling behind in her studies for months. Her grades were slipping, and she seemed to lose confidence with each passing day. Marcus had hired the best tutors money could buy, enrolled her in expensive after-school programs, and even brought in specialists from top universities. Nothing seemed to work. Emma would come home frustrated and in tears, claiming that numbers just didn't make sense to her. As Marcus waited for Emma outside the school that Tuesday afternoon, he noticed something unusual happening near the old oak tree by the playground. A small crowd of children had gathered around someone sitting on the ground. He couldn't see who it was, but the children seemed completely captivated. Their laughter and excited voices carried across the schoolyard. Emma came running toward the car, but instead of getting in immediately, she tugged on her father's expensive suit jacket. "Daddy, you have to see this. There's this amazing lady who makes math so fun and easy. She taught us how to count using stones and leaves, and I actually understood everything." Marcus looked at his daughter's face, which was glowing with excitement, something he hadn't seen when it came to schoolwork in a very long time. "What lady, sweetheart?" he asked, following Emma's gaze toward the crowd of children. "She's right there by the tree. She doesn't have fancy clothes or a classroom, but she's the best teacher ever. She showed us how to add numbers by making patterns with rocks, and she taught Tommy how to multiply using flower petals. Even Sarah, who hates math more than vegetables, was laughing and solving problems." Marcus felt his curiosity growing. Any teacher who could make his daughter excited about mathematics deserved his attention. He locked the car and walked with Emma toward the gathering. As they got closer, he could hear a gentle, patient voice explaining mathematical concepts in the simplest terms imaginable. "Now, children, if we have 3 groups of 4 apples each, how many apples do we have in total? Let's use these pine cones to figure it out together. Don't worry if you don't get it right away. Learning is a journey, not a race." When Marcus finally saw the teacher, his breath caught in his throat. Sitting cross-legged under the oak tree was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Her jeans had patches, her sweater was threadbare, and her shoes were worn thin. Her long brown hair was neatly braided, and despite her obvious poverty, she had the brightest, most genuine smile Marcus had ever seen. The woman's name was Sarah Chen, though Marcus didn't know it yet. She was indeed homeless, living in a shelter downtown and spending her days in the park near the school. But what struck Marcus most wasn't her appearance. It was the way she interacted with the children. She treated each question with respect, celebrated every small victory, and had an incredible gift for making complex ideas simple and fun. "Miss Sarah," Emma called out, running toward the woman. "This is my daddy. I told him how amazing you are at teaching math." Sarah looked up at Marcus, and for a moment, he saw a flash of worry in her eyes. She quickly began gathering her makeshift teaching materials, the stones, leaves, and pine cones she used for her lessons. "I hope I wasn't disturbing anyone," she said quietly, starting to stand up. "I just noticed some of the children struggling with their homework, and I thought maybe I could help." Marcus found himself speechless for a moment. Here was someone with obviously limited resources who was dedicating her time to help children learn, expecting nothing in return. "Please don't go," he said, his voice gentler than usual. "Emma tells me you've been helping her understand mathematics. That's something I've been trying to accomplish for months." Sarah smiled nervously, brushing dirt off her worn jeans. "Mathematics isn't scary when you can see it and touch it. Children learn better when they can connect numbers to real things they can understand. I used to be a teacher before." She paused, not finishing the sentence. The other children began to disperse as their parents arrived to pick them up, but Emma stayed close to Sarah. "Daddy, can Miss Sarah teach me more tomorrow, please? She makes everything make sense." Marcus looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Sarah, who was clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. Something about this situation felt important, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. "Where did you learn to teach like this?" Marcus asked Sarah, genuinely curious. "I have a master's degree in education from the state university," Sarah replied, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I specialized in elementary mathematics education. I taught at Roosevelt Elementary for 3 years before life took an unexpected turn." Marcus filed away this information, his business mind already working. Here was someone with genuine qualifications and an obvious gift for teaching, yet she was living on the streets and volunteering her time to help children. There was clearly more to Sarah's story, and Marcus found himself wanting to know what had led such a talented person to such difficult circumstances. As they prepared to leave, Sarah handed Emma a small notebook. "I made this for you," she said with a warm smile. "It has some fun math games you can try at home. Remember, you're much smarter than you think you are." Emma hugged the notebook to her chest as if it were treasure. As they walked back to the Mercedes, she chattered excitedly about everything she had learned. Marcus listened, amazed by his daughter's enthusiasm and the change in her attitude toward mathematics. That night, as Marcus tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, why doesn't Miss Sarah have a real classroom? She's so much better than my regular math teacher." The question haunted Marcus as he sat in his home office later that evening, staring out at his perfectly manicured garden. He had everything money could buy, yet this homeless woman had accomplished in one afternoon what months of expensive tutoring had failed to achieve. There was definitely more to this story, and Marcus Wellington was determined to find out what it was. The next morning, Marcus found himself arriving at Emma's school 30 minutes early. He told himself it was just to observe this mysterious teacher who had made such an impact on his daughter, but deep down, he knew his curiosity ran deeper than that. Something about Sarah Chen had stayed with him all night. From his car, Marcus watched as Sarah arrived at the school grounds. She walked slowly, carrying a worn backpack that seemed to contain her teaching materials. Even from a distance, he could see the care with which she arranged stones, leaves, and other natural objects under the oak tree. She was preparing for another day of voluntary teaching, asking for nothing in return. As children began to gather around Sarah before school started, Marcus decided to get closer. He positioned himself on a nearby bench where he could observe without being too obvious. What he witnessed over the next 20 minutes completely changed his perspective on education. Sarah had managed to turn basic arithmetic into an adventure story. She created characters out of acorns and leaves, giving them names and personalities. "Captain Acorn needs to distribute supplies equally among his crew of 12 squirrels," she explained to the fascinated children. "If he has 64 nuts, how many will each squirrel receive?" The children eagerly worked together, using small stones to represent nuts and dividing them into groups. When they arrived at the correct answer, Sarah celebrated as if they had solved the world's greatest mystery. "Brilliant, you're all mathematical detectives." But what impressed Marcus most was how Sarah handled mistakes. When one child miscounted, she didn't correct him with frustration. Instead, she said, "That's a great attempt. Let's double-check together and see if we can spot where the numbers got mixed up." She turned every error into a learning opportunity, making the children feel safe to try again. After the children went inside for regular classes, Sarah began cleaning up her materials. Marcus approached her, his expensive shoes crunching on the fallen leaves. "That was remarkable," he said, causing Sarah to look up in surprise. "I've never seen children so engaged with mathematics." Sarah stood up, dusting off her hands. "Children are naturally curious about everything, including numbers. They just need to see that math exists all around them, not just on worksheets and blackboards." Marcus studied her face, noting the intelligence in her eyes and the passion in her voice when she spoke about teaching. "Emma couldn't stop talking about your lessons last night. She actually asked to practice math problems before bed, something that's never happened before." A genuine smile spread across Sarah's face. "Emma is incredibly bright. She just learns differently than traditional methods usually accommodate. Some children need to touch and manipulate objects to understand abstract concepts." "Where are you staying?" Marcus asked suddenly, then immediately regretted the directness of his question when he saw Sarah stiffen. "I manage she replied quietly, avoiding his eyes. There are resources available for people in transition. Marcus realized. He had touched on a sensitive subject, but his curiosity about her circumstances was growing stronger. Here was an educated, talented woman who clearly cared about children's education, yet she was living in what appeared to be poverty. Something didn't add up. "I'm sorry if that was too personal," Marcus said. "It's just that Emma has been struggling with math for months, and in one afternoon, you accomplished what professional tutors couldn't achieve in weeks of expensive sessions." Sarah looked at him more carefully, taking in his expensive suit and confident demeanor. "You must be quite successful to afford private tutors. What kind of work do you do?" For once in his life, Marcus felt uncomfortable talking about his wealth and success. "I'm in technology," he said simply, not mentioning that his company was worth billions or that his name regularly appeared in business magazines. "Technology is fascinating," Sarah replied. "I actually minored in computer science during my undergraduate years. I always thought there were amazing possibilities for using technology to make learning more interactive and engaging." This revelation surprised Marcus even more. Not only was Sarah an effective teacher, but she also had knowledge of his field. The mystery of her circumstances deepened. As they talked, Marcus noticed that Sarah kept glancing toward the street, nervously. She seemed anxious about something, checking her watch repeatedly. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Sarah hesitated before answering. "I have an appointment at the employment office this morning. I'm hoping to find work soon." She paused, then added quietly, "Teaching positions are difficult to come by right now, especially when your references are complicated." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by complicated references, Emma came running out of the school building with several other children. Apparently it was recess time. "Miss Sarah, Miss Sarah," Emma called excitedly. "I solved all the math problems in class today. Mrs. Peterson said she's never seen me work so confidently with numbers." Sarah's face lit up with pride and joy. "That's wonderful, Emma. You see? You were always capable of understanding mathematics, you just needed to believe in yourself." As Marcus watched his daughter interact with Sarah, he noticed something beautiful happening. Emma wasn't just learning mathematics, she was gaining confidence in her abilities. The change in his daughter's posture and enthusiasm was remarkable. "Daddy," Emma said, tugging on Marcus's jacket, "can Miss Sarah come to our house for dinner? She could see my room and maybe help me with my homework." Marcus saw Sarah's face flush with embarrassment. "Oh, Emma, that's very sweet, but I'm sure your father has other plans." "Actually," Marcus heard himself saying, "that's not a bad idea. If you're free this evening, we'd love to have you join us for dinner. Emma clearly benefits from your teaching approach, and I'd like to learn more about your methods." Sarah looked uncertain. "I don't want to impose, and I'm not sure I'm dressed appropriately for dinner at your home." "Nonsense," Marcus replied, though he was already planning to handle the clothing situation delicately. "We eat dinner at 6:30. Would 7 o'clock work for you? I can pick you up wherever is convenient." Sarah's eyes showed a mix of gratitude and anxiety. "That's very kind, but I can find my way there if you give me the address." Marcus wrote his address on a business card, then paused before handing it to her. For the first time, he noticed how thin Sarah looked, as if she hadn't been eating regular meals. The realization hit him that this dinner invitation might be more important to her than he had initially understood. "7 o'clock then," he said, handing her the card. "And Sarah, thank you for what you're doing for Emma. It means more than you know." As they walked back to the car, Emma chattered excitedly about having Miss Sarah over for dinner. Marcus found himself looking forward to the evening more than he had anticipated. There was something about Sarah Chen that intrigued him beyond her teaching abilities. He sensed there was a story behind her circumstances, a story he was increasingly determined to understand. At 6:15 that evening, Marcus found himself pacing nervously in his spacious living room. His modern mansion, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive artwork, suddenly felt overwhelming. He worried that Sarah might feel uncomfortable in such an opulent environment, given her obvious financial struggles. Emma had spent the afternoon preparing for their guest's arrival. She had drawn several pictures of mathematical equations using Sarah's teaching methods, complete with colorful drawings of acorns and leaves. "I want to show Miss Sarah that I've been practicing," she announced proudly. When the doorbell rang, at exactly 7 o'clock, both Marcus and Emma rushed to answer it. Sarah stood on their doorstep, and Marcus had to admit he was impressed. Despite her limited resources, she had managed to look quite presentable. Her hair was neatly arranged, and she wore what appeared to be her best outfit, simple but clean and pressed. "Welcome to our home," Marcus said warmly, stepping aside to let her enter. He watched Sarah's eyes widen as she took in the grand foyer with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. "Your home is beautiful," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a hint of nervousness. "Thank you so much for inviting me." Emma grabbed Sarah's hand and began giving her an enthusiastic tour of the house. "This is the living room where Daddy watches boring business shows, and this is the kitchen where our cook Maria makes amazing food, and upstairs is my room where I do homework." Now that math makes sense. During dinner, Marcus observed Sarah carefully. She had excellent manners and spoke intelligently about various subjects. Her conversation revealed a well-educated background that made her current circumstances even more puzzling. When Emma asked about her teaching experience, Sarah's face became animated. "I taught 3rd grade at Roosevelt Elementary," Sarah explained, helping Emma with her napkin. "We had students from all different backgrounds and learning styles. Some children are visual learners. Others need to hear information, and some, like Emma, learn best when they can touch and manipulate objects." "What made you decide to become a teacher?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Sarah's expression grew, thoughtful. "My younger brother had learning difficulties when we were growing up. Traditional teaching methods didn't work for him, and he began to believe he was stupid. I spent hours finding creative ways to help him understand his schoolwork. When he finally grasped a concept, his joy was infectious. I realized then that every child deserves to experience that moment of understanding and success." "Where is your brother now?" Emma asked innocently. A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "He passed away 2 years ago in a car accident," she said softly. "He had become a social worker, helping other children who struggled in school." The table fell silent for a moment. Marcus saw tears forming in Sarah's eyes, and he understood that this loss had been significant in shaping her current situation. "Sorry for your loss," Marcus said gently. "It sounds like he was lucky to have you as a sister." Sarah nodded, composing herself. "He taught me that everyone has value and potential, regardless of their circumstances. That's why I continue teaching, even without a formal classroom." After dinner, Sarah helped Emma with her homework at the kitchen table while Marcus cleaned up. He couldn't help but eavesdrop on their interaction. Sarah had transformed Emma's math assignment into an engaging story about a princess who needed to calculate supplies for her kingdom. Emma was not only completing her work but actually enjoying it. "Miss Sarah," Emma said suddenly, "why don't you teach at my school instead of under the tree?" Sarah paused, her pencil hovering over the paper. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, Emma. But the important thing is that learning can happen anywhere, in classrooms, under trees, or even at kitchen tables." Later, as Marcus drove Sarah back toward downtown, she was quieter than she had been all evening. "Thank you for dinner and for welcoming me into your home," she said. "Emma is a wonderful child. You should be very proud." "She's changed so much since meeting you," Marcus replied. "Her confidence in mathematics has improved dramatically. You have a real gift, Sarah." "Teaching is more than a job for me," Sarah said, looking out the window at the city lights. "It's a calling. Even when circumstances are difficult, I can't stop trying to help children learn." Marcus pulled up to the address Sarah had given him, a downtown shelter. His heart sank as he realized the full extent of her situation. "Sarah," he said carefully, "may I ask what happened? How did someone with your education and obvious talent end up here?" Sarah sat quietly for a long moment before answering. 2 years ago, after my brother died, I was struggling with grief and making some poor financial decisions. I co-signed on some loans to help friends who were also struggling. When they couldn't pay, I became responsible for debts I couldn't afford. I lost my apartment and eventually my teaching position when the stress affected my performance. She turned to look at Marcus, her eyes reflecting both pain and determination. The school district requires stable housing addresses for employment, and my credit situation makes it nearly impossible to secure housing. It's a cycle that's difficult to break. But I haven't given up hope. Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach. Here was someone who had lost everything while trying to help others. Yet she continued to give freely of her time and talents to children who needed her help. "Have you considered private tutoring?" he asked. "There are many families who would pay well for someone with your skills." Sarah smiled sadly. "Most families want tutors who come with impressive credentials and references from established institutions. When you're homeless, people make assumptions about your reliability and character, even when your qualifications are solid." As Sarah reached for the door handle, Marcus made an impulsive decision. "Sarah, wait. I have a proposition for you." She turned back to him, curiosity replacing the sadness in her eyes. "Emma clearly learns better with your methods than with traditional tutoring. What if I hired you as her private tutor? The pay would be substantial enough to help you get back on your feet, and you'd be doing what you love, teaching." Sarah's eyes widened. "Marcus, that's incredibly generous, but I don't want charity. If I'm going to accept employment, it needs to be because I've earned it based on my abilities, not because you feel sorry for my circumstances." "This isn't charity," Marcus replied firmly. "This is a business arrangement. Emma needs a teacher who understands her learning style, and you need stable employment. It's mutually beneficial." Sarah sat quietly, considering his offer. "What exactly would this position involve?" she asked. "Help Emma with her homework, provide additional instruction in areas where she struggles, and maybe develop some creative learning activities like the ones you've been doing at school. We could start with a trial period to see how it works for everyone." For the first time since he'd met her, Marcus saw genuine hope flickering in Sarah's eyes. "I would need some time to consider this carefully," she said. "It's a significant opportunity, and I want to make sure I can meet your expectations." "Of course," Marcus said. "Take all the time you need. But Sarah, I want you to know that this offer comes from watching you work with Emma and seeing the results. You're exactly the kind of teacher she needs." As Sarah walked toward the shelter entrance, Marcus sat in his car thinking about the evening's revelations. He had started the day curious about a homeless woman teaching children under a tree. Now he was offering her employment and wondering how someone so talented and caring had fallen through society's safety net. More importantly, he was beginning to realize that Sarah Chen might be exactly what both he and Emma had been searching for, though neither of them had known it until now. 3 days passed before Sarah contacted Marcus. When she called, her voice carried a mix of nervousness and determination that he was beginning to recognize as characteristic of her personality. "I've given your offer serious consideration," she said. "I would like to accept the tutoring position, but I have some conditions." Marcus smiled, appreciating her directness. "I'm listening." "First, I want this to be a professional arrangement with clear expectations and boundaries. Second, I'd like to start with a 2-week trial period where either of us can end the arrangement if it's not working. Third, I want to be paid fairly but not excessively. I need to earn my way back to stability, not have it handed to me." "Those all sound reasonable," Marcus replied. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow, if that works for you. But I should mention that I'll need to continue my morning sessions with the children at school. Those kids depend on that help and I can't abandon them." Marcus found himself impressed once again by Sarah's character. Even in her difficult circumstances, she was thinking about others who needed her help. "That's fine. We can work around your schedule." The next afternoon, Sarah arrived at the Wellington house carrying her worn backpack and a new notebook. Emma practically bounced off the walls with excitement when she saw her favorite teacher walking up their driveway. "Miss Sarah," Daddy said, "you're going to be my real tutor now, is it true? Are you really going to help me with homework every day?" "That's right, Emma," Sarah said with a warm smile. "We're going to make learning even more fun than before." Marcus showed Sarah to the study he had prepared for their tutoring sessions. He had stocked it with basic supplies, But Sarah immediately began rearranging things to create a more hands-on learning environment. Traditional desk and chair setups don't work for all children, she explained, moving cushions to create a comfortable floor area. Some kids think better when they can move around and touch things. As Marcus watched Sarah work with Emma that first afternoon, he realized he was witnessing something special. Sarah had transformed homework time from a daily struggle into an adventure. She turned a math word problem about buying groceries into a shopping expedition around the house. With Emma calculating costs and making change using play money Sarah had created from construction paper. If apples cost $2 per pound, and you need 3 pounds for your recipe, how much will you spend on apples? Sarah asked, spreading out the play money. Emma picked up the paper bills, counting carefully. 2 plus 2 plus 2 was $6, she announced proudly. Excellent. Now if you pay with a $10 bill, how much change should you receive? Emma worked through the problem methodically, using the manipulative materials Sarah had provided. When she arrived at the correct answer, her face glowed with satisfaction. Marcus found himself lingering near the study, fascinated by Sarah's teaching methods. She never simply gave Emma the answers. Instead, she guided her daughter through thought processes that helped her discover solutions independently. Over the following days, Marcus began to notice changes in both Emma and himself. Emma's confidence continued to grow, and she started approaching all her subjects with more enthusiasm. She would rush home from school eager to work with Sarah, something Marcus had never imagined possible. But Marcus also found himself looking forward to Sarah's daily visits for reasons that had nothing to do with Emma's education. Sarah brought a warmth and intelligence to their home that had been missing since his wife died 3 years earlier. Her laugh was infectious, and her insights about everything from children's development to current events were thoughtful and engaging. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus and Sarah were reviewing her progress over tea in the kitchen. She's remarkable, Sarah said, flipping through Emma's work from the past week. Her mathematical reasoning skills are actually quite advanced. She just needed to build confidence in her abilities. You've accomplished in 1 week what months of expensive tutoring couldn't achieve, Marcus replied. Emma actually asked to do extra math problems yesterday. I never thought I'd see the day. Sarah smiled, but Marcus noticed she looked tired. Despite her professional success with Emma, he knew she was still returning to the shelter each night, and the stress of her living situation was taking its toll. Sarah, he said carefully, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how are things going with your housing situation? Sarah's smile faded slightly. I'm working on it. The steady income from this position will help establish the employment history. I need to qualify for housing assistance programs. It just takes time. Marcus had been thinking about this issue for days. He had done some research and discovered that Sarah's situation was more common than he had realized. Many qualified professionals found themselves trapped in cycles of homelessness due to bureaucratic requirements and the high cost of housing deposits. I have an idea, he said, but I want you to hear me out completely before you respond. Sarah looked at him with interest and slight wariness. There's a guest house on our property that hasn't been used since my mother-in-law passed away. It's completely furnished and self-contained. What if you stayed there temporarily while you work on finding permanent housing? You'd have privacy and stability, and Emma would love having you nearby. Sarah's eyes widened, and Marcus could see her internal struggle playing out on her face. Marcus, I appreciate the offer, but that feels like too much. I don't want to blur the lines between our professional relationship and charity. It's not charity, Marcus insisted. Think of it as employee housing. Many companies provide accommodation for key personnel. The guest house is sitting empty, and having you on the property would actually be convenient for Emma's tutoring schedule. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the guest house Marcus had mentioned. He could see her considering the offer from multiple angles. What would Emma think about me living so close? She asked. Emma suggested it before I did, Marcus admitted. She asked me yesterday why you couldn't just live here so you wouldn't have to travel back and forth every day. This revelation seemed to surprise Sarah. She said that? Emma has become quite attached to you. You've given her something I couldn't provide despite all my resources. belief in herself. Sarah turned back to face him, and Marcus could see, tears forming in her eyes. This is all moving very fast. 2 weeks ago, I was teaching under a tree with no prospects. Now you're offering me employment and housing. Sometimes life changes quickly, Marcus said gently. The question is whether you're ready to accept the changes when they come. Sarah sat down again, looking directly at Marcus. If I accept this arrangement, I need you to promise me something. What's that? Promise me that if my performance as Emma's tutor ever becomes unsatisfactory, you'll be honest about it. I don't want special treatment because of my circumstances. I want to earn my place here through my work, not your sympathy. Marcus extended his hand to Sarah. I promise. This is a professional arrangement based on merit. Emma is thriving under your guidance, and that's what matters most. As Sarah shook his hand, Marcus realized that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. What had started as curiosity about a homeless teacher had evolved into respect for a talented professional who had overcome significant challenges. More than that, he was beginning to understand that Sarah Chen had brought something into their lives that had been missing, a sense of hope and possibility that extended far beyond mathematics lessons. When could I move into the guest house? Sarah asked, and Marcus heard a note of relief in her voice that told him just how difficult her current living situation really was. Whenever you're ready, he replied. Tomorrow, if you like. For the first time since he'd met her, Sarah's smile reached her eyes without any shadow of worry or uncertainty. Tomorrow sounds perfect. Moving day revealed just how few possessions Sarah actually owned. Everything she had in the world fit into 2 small suitcases and her faithful backpack. Marcus had expected this, but seeing the reality of her situation still impacted him deeply. Here was someone with advanced degrees and exceptional talents who had been reduced to owning almost nothing. Emma insisted on helping Sarah settle into the guest house, chattering excitedly as she showed her around the small but comfortable space. Look, Miss Sarah, there's a kitchen where you can make your own food, and a desk where you can plan math adventures, and windows that look right at our house so we can wave to each other. Sarah stood in the center of the living room, slowly taking in her new surroundings. The guest house was modest by Marcus's standards, but luxurious compared to the shelter. It had a bedroom, bathroom, small kitchen, and living area with large windows that filled the space with natural light. This is beautiful, Sarah whispered, running her hand along the smooth surface of the dining table. I can't remember the last time I had my own space. Marcus watched from the doorway, moved by Sarah's emotional response to what he considered basic accommodations. It reminded him how much he took for granted in his daily life. There are fresh linens in the bedroom closet, he said, and Maria stocked the kitchen with some basic groceries to get you started. Sarah turned to him with tears in her eyes. Marcus, I don't know how to thank you. This isn't just housing. It's dignity. It's having a place where I can prepare lessons and grade papers and just exist as a normal person again. Over the following weeks, Marcus observed remarkable changes in Sarah. With stable housing and regular meals, she seemed to blossom. Her posture improved, her smile came more easily, and her already impressive teaching abilities became even more refined. Emma's academic progress was extraordinary. Not only had her mathematics skills improved dramatically, but Sarah's teaching methods were positively affecting all her subjects. Sarah had a gift for connecting different areas of learning, showing Emma how math related to science, how reading, comprehension skills applied to word problems, and how creative thinking enhanced problem-solving abilities. But Marcus noticed something else developing. The relationship between Sarah and Emma was evolving beyond teacher and student. Emma had begun seeking Sarah's advice about friendship problems at school, sharing her dreams and worries, and including Sarah in conversations about everything from favorite books to what she wanted to be when she grew up. One evening, Marcus found Emma and Sarah in the garden, using measuring cups to understand fractions by watering plants. If this plant needs 1 cup of water and we're using a 1/4 measuring cup, how many times do we need to fill it? Sarah asked. Emma counted on her fingers, then began filling the measuring cup. 4 times, she announced after pouring. Perfect. You're becoming a fraction expert. Soon you'll be teaching me. Emma giggled. Miss Sarah, can I ask you something personal? Of course, sweetie. Do you ever want to have kids of your own someday? Marcus, who had been approaching to call them for dinner, stopped walking, curious about Sarah's response. Sarah paused in her watering, considering the question carefully. I've always loved working with children, Emma. In many ways, all my students feel like they're part of my extended family. Each child I teach becomes special to me. But what about having a family, like a husband and kids who live with you all the time? Sarah glanced toward the house, perhaps sensing Marcus's presence. Someday, maybe. The right situation hasn't come along yet. What made you think about that? Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, I just think you'd be a really good mom. You're patient and kind, and you make everything fun. Sometimes I pretend you're like a mom to me, since my real mom is in heaven. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. Emma rarely talked about her mother, who had died of cancer when Emma was 5. Hearing his daughter express such feelings about Sarah stirred emotions he hadn't expected. Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. Emma, that's one of the sweetest things anyone has ever said to me. Your real mom must have been an amazing person to have such a wonderful daughter. I'm honored that you feel comfortable with me. Do you think she would like you? Emma asked. I hope so, Sarah replied gently. I think any mother would appreciate someone who cares about her child's happiness and success. That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus found himself walking to the guest house. Sarah was sitting on her small porch grading papers by lamplight. Do you mind if I join you? He asked. Of course not. 6 months after Sarah moved into the guest house, Marcus made a decision that would change all their lives forever. He had spent weeks researching educational nonprofits, business licenses, and property development regulations. What started as curiosity about Sarah's dream had evolved into a concrete plan. On a Saturday morning, Marcus asked Sarah to take a drive with him while Emma was at a birthday party. I want to show you something, he said mysteriously. They drove to a charming neighborhood about 15 minutes from Marcus's house, where he parked in front of a beautiful old Victorian house with a for sale sign in the front yard. What do you think of this property? Marcus asked casually. Sarah studied the house with its wraparound porch and large windows. It's lovely, very homey and welcoming. Why are we looking at it? Because I think it would make an excellent learning center, Marcus replied, getting out of the car. Sarah's eyes widened as she followed him toward the house. Marcus, what are you talking about? I've been thinking about your dream of opening a center for children who need specialized learning approaches. This property has enough space for multiple classrooms, a library, offices, and even outdoor learning areas in the backyard. Sarah stopped walking. Marcus, you can't be serious. I told you that dream was years away, maybe never achievable. Why can't it be achievable now? Marcus asked, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. I've already spoken with the realtor. We can tour the inside. As they walked through the house, Marcus could see Sarah's imagination taking over despite her protests. She pointed out how certain rooms could be converted into specialized learning spaces, where the library could be located, and how the kitchen could be used for practical math lessons involving cooking and measurement. The natural lighting in this front room would be perfect for children who are easily distracted, Sarah said, almost to herself. And the hardwood floors would be ideal for movement-based learning activities. So you can envision it working? Marcus asked. Sarah turned to him with a mixture of excitement and fear in her eyes. Marcus, I can envision it perfectly, but I can't let you buy me a building. That goes far beyond professional support into charity territory, and we've discussed how I feel about that. What if it wasn't charity? Marcus asked. What if it was a business partnership? Sarah looked at him with confusion. I provide the initial capital and property, Marcus explained. You provide the expertise, curriculum development, and day-to-day management. We structure it as a non-profit organization with a board of directors. You'd be the executive director, and I'd be the founding donor and board chair. Sarah sat down on the window seat in what could become the main classroom, considering Marcus's proposal. Why would you do this? She asked quietly. You barely knew me 6 months ago. Marcus sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. Because Emma isn't the only child who needs what you offer. There are hundreds of kids in this city who are struggling in traditional classrooms, whose parents can't afford specialized help. You have the ability to change their lives. But this is a huge investment. What if I fail? What if the center doesn't succeed? Then we'll have tried, Marcus replied. But I don't think you'll fail, Sarah. I've watched you work with Emma and those children at the school. You have something special that can't be taught or bought. That evening, Sarah asked if she could prepare dinner for Marcus and Emma as a way to think through the proposal. As they ate the simple but delicious meal she had made, Emma chattered about her day while Marcus observed the comfortable family dynamic that had developed between them. After Emma went to bed, Sarah presented Marcus with a detailed proposal she had written that afternoon. If we're going to do this, she said, I want it done right. I've outlined a mission statement, target demographics, staffing needs, curriculum philosophy, and a 5-year business plan. Marcus was impressed by the thoroughness of her work. You wrote all this today? I've been thinking about this dream for years, Sarah admitted. I just never thought I'd have the opportunity to make it real. As they discussed the details of Sarah's proposal, Marcus found himself falling deeper in love with her passion and intelligence. Somewhere along the way, his feelings for Sarah had evolved from respect to something much deeper, though he hadn't acknowledged it until now. Sarah, he said during a pause in their planning, can I tell you something that's not related to the Learning Center? She looked up from her notes with curiosity. These past 6 months have been the happiest Emma and I have experienced since my wife died. You've brought joy and stability into our lives that goes far beyond tutoring. Sarah set down her pen, giving him her full attention. I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond professional respect, Marcus continued. I care about you deeply, and I hope that someday you might feel the same way about me. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, I care about you too. More than I should, probably. But I'm terrified of mixing my professional recovery with personal feelings. What if things don't work out between us? What happens to the Learning Center? What happens to Emma? What if things do work out? Marcus asked gently. What if we could build something beautiful together, both personally and professionally? Before Sarah could answer, they heard Emma's voice from upstairs. Miss Sarah? I had a bad dream. Can you come tuck me in again? Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look that acknowledged both the interruption and the significance of the moment. I should go to her, Sarah said softly. As Marcus watched Sarah head upstairs to comfort his daughter, he realized that his question had already been answered. Sarah was already part of their family in every way that mattered. The Learning Center would give her professional fulfillment, but what he really wanted was for her to choose to stay with them permanently. The next morning, Sarah knocked on Marcus's office door with a determined expression. I've made my decision, she announced. Marcus looked up from his computer, his heart racing. I want to move forward with the Learning Center partnership, Sarah said. And I want to explore the possibility of a personal relationship with you, but slowly and carefully with Emma's well-being as our top priority. Marcus stood up and walked around his desk. Are you sure? I'm sure that I love Emma like she's my own daughter, Sarah replied. I'm sure that you're the most generous and understanding man I've ever met. And I'm sure that we could build something amazing together if we're brave enough to try. Marcus took Sarah's hands in his. Then let's be brave. 1 year later, the Wellington Chen Learning Center opened its doors to its first class of 20 students. Sarah, now bearing Marcus's last name after their quiet wedding ceremony, stood in the main classroom watching children discover the joy of learning through hands-on methods. Emma, now 9 and thriving academically, served as an unofficial ambassador for the center, telling anyone who would listen about how Miss Sarah saved my brain from being bad at math. As Marcus watched his wife help a struggling child understand fractions using colorful blocks, he marveled at the journey that had brought them together. It had started with curiosity about a homeless woman teaching children under a tree. It had led to the most fulfilling personal and professional partnership of his life. Dorothy Chen had eventually come around, admitting that David would have been proud of Sarah's work with children. The Learning Center had become exactly what Sarah had dreamed, a place where every child could discover their potential, regardless of their learning style or family's financial situation. Most evenings, the three of them could be found in their garden, where Sarah continued to teach Emma mathematical concepts using plants, stones, and measuring cups, but now their lessons included planning for the future, calculating how many more children they could help, measuring the growth of both plants and dreams, and discovering that the most important equations in life couldn't always be solved with numbers. The homeless teacher who had once sat under a tree with nothing but her passion for education had become the executive director of a thriving learning center, a beloved wife, and the mother Emma had always needed. And Marcus had learned that sometimes the most valuable treasures come disguised as people others overlook, teaching children under trees while asking for nothing in return.